Chapter 10 Sinking Feeling. Shelley hoped dinner would take her mind off everything. Takeout containers littered the cafeteria table at the aquarium. Colorful murals of fish, sea turtles, dolphins, coral reefs, and other marine life covered the walls. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Triton Bay, where the sun was dipping into the ocean. Soon darkness would fall. She, her brother, and her father had gone to the aquarium after school to order Chinese food. But Shelley's father had been so busy with a leaking tank on the upper ocean deck that he'd forgotten to call in the order. So, Shelley had taken matters into her own hands, locating the crumbled takeout menu and his credit card. By the time the food showed up, they were famished. Dawson was even starting to drum his fingers on the table. She had thrust the lo mein at him the second the food arrived, along with chopsticks, even though he ate with his hands. "Sorry about dinner," her father said, digging into his chicken and veggies. "No problem," Shelley said, reaching for the kung pao shrimp, her favorite dish of all time. "Lo mein is like salty spaghetti," Dawson said, slurping up the noodles. "Isn't that cool?" "It sure is," their father said. Shelley cracked open the container she was holding and shoveled some shrimp into her mouth. But as soon as it hit her tongue, she almost gagged. She spat it out on her plate in disgust. Her father shot her a strange look. "What is it, honey?" Dawson cracked up. "Shelley's gonna puke." Shelley set the kung pao shrimp aside, her stomach rumbling, and settled for plain rice instead. "What is wrong with me?" Usually she loves seafood. She had an uneasy feeling this had something to do with her wish too. She wouldn't be surprised. "Kiddos, it's really nice to have you here," their father said, looking up from his food. "Honestly, it gets kind of lonely during the week, even with all our fishy friends for company." "Yeah, Dad, we miss you too," she said, and she meant it. She quickly wiped away a tear and finished her rice. After dinner, while her father worked on the leaky tank and Dawson released his pent-up energy in the interactive play area, Shelley wandered through the labyrinth of the aquarium's corridors. It felt like a different world down there. Wild, exciting, alien, and free. She loved being there more than anywhere in the world, but problems weighed heavily on her heart like an anchor. She glanced down the halls, which were empty and dimly lit. It was after hours, but many of the staffers and trainers were still working, cleaning up after the busy day of visitors or tending to the many animals in their care. Usually, she'd love to check the pH of the tanks with her father or feed the dolphins their gleaming silver fish. But that night, she wanted to be alone. She pressed her face to the glass of Queenie's tank. "I wish you could talk to me." The octopus seemed to understand. She swam up to the glass, her 8 tentacles undulating in the eerie underwater lighting that filtered through the tank. "You see, I have all these problems," she said to the tank, soothed by Queenie's graceful movements, "but I can't tell anyone about them. And it's the worst to feel alone." "Hey, Shelley, what's up?" The voice made her jump, but then she relaxed. It was Enrique. "Oh, hey," she said, playing it cool even though he'd caught her talking to an octopus. "You know, I talk to them too," he said, flashing a conspiratorial grin. He studied Queenie. "I think they understand us. Or maybe it's just my imagination. What do you think?" How much could she tell him about what she knew? That there was deep magic in Triton Bay? That, indeed, some of the life down there could very likely understand them? "Yeah, I think they do," she said. "Right?" Enrique was staring at her woolen scarf. "Haven't seen you around much." "Oh, I've been busy with the new swim season," she said, suddenly brightening. For a second, she forgot about her troubles. "I even set a new record time in practice." "Wow, congrats," he said with a genuine smile. "Glad you've improved since your plunge into the ocean." Just kidding, of course. Their eyes met, and he held her gaze. She thought of how he'd saved her by pulling her out of the ocean. But then her hand returned to the scarf around her neck. She couldn't risk him, or anyone finding out about her gills. She felt them flare. Right. Hey, I have to help my dad with the leaking tank. And with that, she ran off and left him standing by Queenie. Why did she always act so awkward around him? The truth was she liked him. But somehow she always found a way to ruin it. She always ended up acting, well, as Atina would say, #lame. What else could possibly go wrong? After they had finished up at the aquarium and gone back to her father's apartment to watch an animated movie, Shelley tossed the half-full takeout containers into the fridge. Okay, time for bed, their father said, switching off the TV. You're the coolest dad in the whole universe, Dawson said with a toothy grin. And you're the coolest kid, their father said, muzzing Dawson's hair. Now brush your teeth. We've got a big day at the aquarium tomorrow. Just like old times, Shelley said from the kitchen. She'd always loved their family weekends at the aquarium. It was their little tradition. Her father smiled. Yep, just like old times. Shelley started down the hallway. That was when she remembered she had to share a room with Dawson. He was a total mouth breather. After they had both brushed their teeth, changed into their pajamas, and wiggled into their twin beds, Shelley stared up at the ceiling. Isn't this cool? Dawson whispered in the dark. It's like we're having a slumber party. Shelley glanced at his general direction. Yeah, totally. She resisted the urge to roll her eyes. She knew that all the recent change must have been hard on him. Want to tell scary stories? He went on excitedly. Rex told me a good one about sea monsters called sirens that sing beautiful songs to lure in sailors to eat them. Usually I'd love to hear your stories, but I'm exhausted, she replied. And it was true. She could barely keep her eyes open. It had been the longest day in a series of long days. She was looking forward to a cozy Saturday at the aquarium. Okay, his voice sounded sad. I wish I had Mr. Bubbles. He always stayed up until the day he went to the ocean in the sky, she thought, finishing his sentence in her mind. Shelley felt even worse for being a lousy sister. She closed her eyes, wanting nothing more than sleep. Drip, drip, drip. Shelley woke with a start. She didn't know how long she'd been sleeping. If she had to guess, it was the middle of the night. She heard Dawson's snores. Was that what had woken her? She listened in the darkness. Drip, drip, drip. It wasn't loud, but it was driving her crazy. She climbed from the bed and plodded out of the room and across the apartment and on autopilot. Just as she had thought, the kitchen faucet was leaking. She tried to shut it off, but when she turned the knob, the faucet started dripping even more. And more. Puzzled, she tried twisting the knob the other way, but the water kept flowing. She flicked on the light and put her head near the opening to study the problem. Suddenly, murky black water gushed out of the faucet. It didn't look like water. It looked more like squid ink. Like the kind she poured onto her hands from the shampoo bottle in the locker room. And it was filling the sink, nearly spilling over its brim. Then seaweed trendles shot out of the sink drain and wrapped around her neck. They tightened and started pulling her face toward the putrid black water. Shelley struggled to get them off, prying the sinewy plant with her fingers. She wanted to scream, but she could barely get out a breath, and then her face was plunged into the sink. Under the contaminated water, garbage floated by. She tried to breathe, but plastic bags clogged her gills and made it impossible. Stars danced in her vision. A voice sounded in her ears. You poor unfortunate soul! Don't forget our deal, or else! She screamed under the black water.